Welcome to the Garden Angelus, where we talk about flowers, veggies, and all the best dirt. I'm Dee Nash from Guthrie, Oklahoma.
And I'm Carol Michael from Indianapolis, Indiana. We call ourselves Garden Angelus because we are evangelists for gardening. We love gardening and we want others to love it too.
We are also authors and invite you to check out our books, including my book, The 2030 Something Garden Guide, and No Fuss, Down and Dirty Gardening 101 for anyone who wants to grow stuff.
And my books, including Potted and Pruned, Homegrown and Handpicked, and Seeded and Sodded, my trilogy of gardening humor, and my new book, Creatures and Critters, Who's in My Garden. You can ask for any of our books at your favorite bookstore or find them online wherever books are sold.
And speaking of online, you can also find us at the Garden Angelus on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and Pinterest. And we'd love for you to join our Facebook group, the Garden Angelus Garden Club.
And now on to this week's episode.
So let's start with our big garden updates, Carol.
The big updates in the spring for sure. You want me to go first?
I want you to go first.
So on Monday, I had some arborists come and they trimmed my gigantic honey locust tree, which is Bladitsia triacanthos, and it is the variety Skyline. And I had not had it professionally pruned in 20 plus years, and it needed it, and it looks really good. And then all the chippings, I had them leave them for me because they were free.
Free mulch. We love free mulch.
And I moved them back to an area that had where I had let grass kind of grow into the bed, and there wasn't anything planted, and I trimmed that back to nubbins, and then I threw this on top, and some grass may still come back in, but I'm going to work on that this summer to keep that a planting area.
And that's a good place to put fresh clippings from a tree because when they're fresh, they don't decay as quickly as aged clippings. And so that's a good place to put them.
And I had another trip to the greenhouse with my sister, a stealth trip before they opened.
Did you wear a mask?
We wore masks, and we really concentrated on getting my sister stuff because she works in a hospital and she needed the de-stressing of gardening. So about 2 minutes in, I thought, I can't pick out my stuff and her stuff. So we filled up 3 wagonfuls of her stuff. I did get 6 plants.
You managed to still get 6 plants even when you weren't concentrating on yourself. That's funny.
I couldn't help it. We'll talk about those another time. They're cool.
So at my house, I got all of the tomatoes in, all of the eggplants. Well, that's not true. The Bride, which is my white Asian eggplant, it is still too small to transplant. And I got most of the peppers. For some unknown reason, I bought 6 poblano peppers, which means I need another bag. I know, I'm going to be drowning in peppers this year. I think I was afraid I wouldn't be able to find any plants. So anytime I found some plants, I just hoarded them like other people hoarded toilet paper. I've now given them away to a bunch of people. And anyway, but the exciting news, I did order some lavender too. And I'm excited about that. But the really exciting news is I ordered 150 plugs of 3 kinds of milkweed for my upper pasture, and 100 of them came in. And boy, they came in a mess. I bought these plugs from the Monarch Watch Milkweed Market. Don't try to say that too fast. Right. And these are native milkweeds. They're native to Oklahoma and other parts of the United States too. And it's Asclepias asperula, which is antelope milkweed, and Asclepias viridis, which ought to tell you exactly what it is just from the Latin name, green milkweed. So I planted all of that in my upper pasture. I'm still waiting on 50 more, and that'll be A. speciosa, which is showy milkweed. So my hope is to help more monarch butterflies. You know, that's one of my causes, and for people who are longtime listeners, I put a bunch of seeds in that upper pasture, and it's starting to bloom.
Oh, we need to see pictures. And it sounds like your pasture is going to become like a place that the monarchs are going to put on the map to stop at. Let's stop at Dee's.
Let's hope so. I saw 2 monarchs in my garden last week, which is a little early. I don't usually see them until the late summer, but They must have been on their way up from Texas, and I'm kind of excited about
Yeah.
that. There was a male and a female. Oh, guess what else I saw?
What?
If I can remember what it's called. Okay, it was the moth I had never seen.
The Luna moth.
The Luna moth. My husband, I was actually making my lunch yesterday, and I was so tired, and he was like, Dee, come out here and take a picture of this butterfly. And I was like, I really was, because I was really tired. And I walked out there, and it wasn't a butterfly. It was a Luna moth.
Did you take a picture?
I got tons of pictures of it, so I'll share them.
No, that's fabulous. I have not.
She looked a little, she looked really sad. She was toward the end of her little life. But, those antennae that are just that, they look like little wire brushes. So
yeah.
cute.
They're very cute. Did I see anything exciting like that in my garden?
Butterfly.
Nope.
Bumblebee.
I've seen some bees, a lot of bees on my flowering crabapple the other day, and I was trying to get a really cool picture of bees buzzing, little film. So the neighbors probably thought, why is she standing there with her camera staring at that? How many pictures of that tree does she need? But,
My neighbor, that's okay. I'm up in my upper pasture sitting down and spraying it with water and doing all kinds of weird stuff. And my neighbors just drive by and they think I'm nuts.
They're just collecting evidence, Dee. They're just collecting evidence.
Yeah. It's for the book, as our friend Lanny says.
So let's go on with our quote and talk about our flower.
You go for it.
For still there are so many things that I have never seen. In every wood, in every spring, there is a different green. That's J.R.R. Tolkien from a song sang by Bilbo Baggins. I sat beside the fire and think.
Every spring is a new green.
It is.
I said that about the garden. I said, oh my gosh, it's so beautiful this year, because it really is. And my daughter Megan was over with our grandbaby, and Megan said, Mom, it always looks this good.
Well, this has been a really slow spring here. And so the violas and pansies are they're the best I've ever had. And a lot of the trees haven't leafed out yet. So it's been very slow, and, it's for the patient person, as these times are.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like waking up every day in the movie Groundhog Day. It's the same.
Except, all my tomato seedlings, I posted on Instagram yesterday. One of them is blooming. It's still in the little jiffy pots.
Yeah.
Still inside. Wait, it's not time to take them outside. It's like, really? You're blooming?
And I think it's time for you to put them in bigger pots.
I'm going to have to, because they're like a foot tall. They need to go in bigger pots, and then... it just takes up more room.
I know this isn't about our flower, but explain why they need to go in bigger pots. They're going to get stressed.
They're going to get very stressed. In fact, they're showing some stress. Some of the lower leaves are yellowing. And so I need to pot them up and because I really shouldn't plant them outside for another 3 to 4 weeks, because we're just not warm enough at night. But anyway, we have an interesting flower this week.
Yeah, one we've never talked about before.
It's actually a tree. It's the black locust, Robinia pseudoacacia, which you have blooming in Oklahoma right now. They're not blooming in Indiana quite yet.
No, and they actually grow in both of our landscapes, not our personal landscapes, but in our ecosystems, which we don't always have the same trees. But there's a colony of these trees that I see every day when I drive home on Pine Street. And you don't even notice these trees at all, except for this time of year. And they have these pendulate, beautiful blooms that looks like they're part of the pea family. They're very, very beautiful. Exactly. They are part of the pea family, and they look like they're part of the pea family. And black locust trees are an interesting tree.
They're extremely interesting. And I think, now that I think about it, I think there are some at a crossroads not far from here. There's a wooded area. And I'm going to look, because I think they'd be blooming in about 2 weeks. But this is a tree of two tails. And
yes, it is.
The first tale I found was that this is not a tree for your landscape. This is one of those trees that suckers badly. And so you would plant one, and they're grove forming, so you would have them coming up all over. Which
you would.
I have. My honey locust is in the pea family, and it is a grove former. And so I do get honey locust sprouts coming up throughout the garden, and I just cut them off. But the black locust is even worse. And so Missouri Botanical Garden tagged this as a weed tree not to be planted in your garden.
Right. I would not plant it in my garden. But guess who did plant it way back when, kind of all over the prairie? Or at least they are attributed to have grown it all over the prairie. Native Americans.
Yes, because this tree, they made a lot of bows and arrows out of this tree. It's a very straight wood. It's a very hard wood. And you found this is the other side of it. So first side we say, oh, this is a trashy, weedy tree and you should never plant it in your garden. On the other hand, you found an article that was very interesting about how this was the wood that built America.
It is. It is. At least it built part of America. So you will find black locust trees all over the United States, especially in the central corridor or anywhere the prairie is, and some back east too. It's a very interesting tree. It doesn't look like much most of the time. It does form colonies. So if you're in Oklahoma and you're driving down I-35 right now, when you listen to this podcast, which will be published on Wednesday, you will see tons of these trees. And once you know what they look like, just look for kind of a white blossoms that hang in clusters, and you'll know exactly what tree it is. It's very cool.
It is. And you found a really cool article about the black locust trees on a site called Live Science. And so we're going to link to that, because when you read about how important it was in colonial America as a source of wood and just how prized it was, you're going to be surprised. But don't plant it in your garden.
Yeah, don't plant it. You don't want it in your garden. But it's kind of like a bodark tree, in that bodark trees are another one that is a wonderful tree, and maybe we'll talk about it sometime. It helped build America too, because it was really, really strong. Anyway, that's our discussion about that tree and the blooms. I saw them when I was driving home, and I said, oh, we should talk about this tree. We never have talked about this flower, because flowers, and I was going to say one more thing. It is pollinated probably by hummingbirds, and they say insects pollinate them, but I never could find out which insects in particular. So it is an important tree in many ways, but also can be a naughty tree, like so many things.
Exactly. So you want to do the quote for the vegetable garden?
I do. Still round the corner there may wait a new road or a secret gate. J.R.R. Tolkien.
Again, we got a theme going.
We do. Carol made us a theme.
I did. So we wanted to talk not so much about new roads or secret gates, although it is kind of a new road for some people that lead straight into gardening this year. And everybody has so many questions about how should I grow vegetables, and do I need to churn up the entire backyard? And so in addition to Dee's book, there is another planting method called square foot gardening. And this is trademarked. And it's
by
Mel Bartholomew. He passed away a few years ago, but there's a Square Foot Gardening Foundation now that carries on this message. And this is a really, I don't want to say simplified, but very methodical way to go about growing vegetables that should ensure some success for just about anybody.
So I actually wrote about Mel's method in my book. There's a whole section on it, because Mel's method is a more simplified version of the French intensive method. And the idea is that you have square feet in however you decide to grow, whether it's raised beds in a big garden that you plow up for some reason, although I don't do all that anymore. Containers, large containers work with this method. In fact, I'm using this method in my giant containers for my tomatoes. And it's actually very simple, even though like compost, we can make it hard.
Right. And you can become, by the way, a certified instructor in the square foot gardening method. And I talked to somebody who is a master gardener who had gotten that certification, and that just allows them to use the square foot garden trademark and give classes and things.
Right.
But essentially, he's taken any vegetable you can grow and tells you how many you can grow in a square foot, or if it takes like 3 square feet to grow it.
Right. So Okay, let me think of how I wanted to put this. So the reason it's an important method is that in the past, people thought that vegetables need more room than they actually do to grow. Some vegetables need a lot of room. Large
Right.
okra plants, for example, need quite a bit of room. But Mel figured it out, and I've always been kind of impressed by how he sat down and scientifically figured it out.
Right. And it's a very efficient use of space. And so
Yes.
I've got one of the books around here somewhere. But let's just take radishes we talked about last week. So take radishes for an example. Mm-hmm. So and I'm just going to guess that maybe you can get, I don't know. You could probably
I would say,
I'm going to say 36 in a square foot, every 2 inches.
yeah, maybe. I don't know. How many tomatoes do you think you can get?
In a square foot, it takes more than 1 square foot for a tomato.
Yeah, it does. I think it's the same. Eggplants, you could probably get, I'm looking at a foot. You could probably get 4 in a foot. But we're just guessing. I mean, you need to get his book. And there's like so many editions of his book that, believe me, you can find one for sale pretty cheap on the used book market. That book has actually kept his publisher in the red for years.
Right. In the black, you mean?
Oh, I'm sorry. In the black. I said it backwards.
Okay. So I'll just look at, I actually pulled out the book.
Okay, cool. So how many radishes?
Okay. I'll tell you in a minute.
Or
I gotta find
whatever.
Radishes. So radishes in a square foot. 1, 2, 3. He plants them every 3 inches, so you can get 16 in a square foot. And so
16 sounds about right.
So you would take and you would mark off your square foot, and then you would mark every 3 inches and stick a seed in there. And that's the other thing is, sometimes you sow a row of radishes and you get real sloppy, and then you got a whole bunch to thin out. He encourages you to, make those holes exactly 3 inches, not exactly, but about 3 inches apart, and then stick a seed in each one. And then you don't have to do the thinning. So it's a very efficient method. And so,
in other words, it is a grid method.
It's a
grid method. And he was probably the type that he did measure it all off. I'm not that scientific. Don't care.
And so
I would just guess, people. That's what I would do. So very interesting. And then you'll get a feel after you've done it a while for how much room different veggies need to grow. And so when I was planting my large containers, I kind of looked at my transplants and I did them according to an intensive method. I won't say it was square foot because I didn't have a grid. He was a big guy. He was big on grids.
He was very big on grids. So, you don't have to get like persnickety with it. That's a fancy word.
Which kind of leads us into our you can also go to their website. We should say that because our bookshelf this week is about his book, if you guys haven't already noticed. And so not only was it our veggie section, but it was also our bookshelf section.
And I think there are 3 editions out there, and I think they're on their 3rd edition.
Only 3.
I think. Well, I don't know what they've updated. My edition here was published in 1981, and I think the method came out in the 70s. So
it's a cool method. It's we'll talk about some other methods in later podcasts about how to grow things, like the lasagna method. There's different versions.
Right.
So do you want to do our next quote, or you want me to do it? You need to do it.
I love this quote. I've been going around saying this quote in my head all week long.
Really?
Yes. It's the job that's never started is takes longest to finish. It's kind of an awkward way it's sort of Middle English, because again, it's J.R.R. Tolkien, the Lord of the Rings. And I go around to myself, I said, so the job that's never started is takes the longest to finish over and over and over again.
That's because you've been moving mulch and doing all the hard early gardening stuff, right?
Well, yes. And so it's sort of like this patch that I put all the mulch on out in the back. I've been looking, I've actually had to mow that section for several years because I let the grass grow in there. So I finally got it covered up.
Good for you. Go girl. Guess what I'm doing that actually applies to this quote?
What are you doing?
I'm removing Rebecca Goldsturm, tons of it from my garden. It got way out of hand while I was out of town last year. So this is the year to do it. So if you have something to do, people, that needs to be done in the garden, and you might as well get started, because I don't think any of us are going back to the movies anytime soon.
No, we are not going back to the movies anytime soon. I've been weeding quite a bit. I had 2 huge trash bags full of weeds that are in my garbage bin to set out for the trash man.
Yeah, weeding never ends. It's kind of like laundry or the dishes in the house.
You're just going to slow down weeds, but now's the time to get what I call the winter weeds. So henbit, chickweed. That's what I was trying to think of. Chickweed. Now's the time to get those and get those before they flower. Hairy bittercress is another one. Pull that out before it flowers.
That's if you live in Indiana. We've been pulling those weeds for a month. So they've gone to flower and then some. So, but what we're talking about in our dirt is how we actually garden personally. How do you actually garden, Carol? Do you go out there and stress over it all, or do you just take it one piece at a time?
Lord, if anybody's listening to this podcast for a year and a half, I am not stressing over it. I just go out there. It's the job that's never started, as it takes longest to finish. I just pick away at it.
Yeah, I do too. And sometimes it gets ahead of me. I think I stress a little in March because there's just so much to do, so many leaves to remove, so many weeds, so much mulch to put down. But as everybody knows, I have a lady who comes and helps me now she comes every couple of weeks or every 3 weeks, and she helps me, and it has actually brought me back my joy in the garden. And it makes her happy because normally she cleans houses, but during the coronavirus, obviously she can't clean houses. So she comes out here, and my garden is 1.5 acres about. She stays at one end. I stay at the other end. We wear gloves. We talk 6 or 8 feet apart, if we talk at all, because she knows what she's doing. So I just say, hey, over there in that corner, could you get those weeds up and could you mulch that? Or could you trim back those shrubs that have just flowered, stuff like that. And she's a good hard worker, and I'm very grateful for her. But I used to stress.
Some people think that I stress over getting my lawn mowed, but I don't really, because I just mow it whenever it needs it.
You just like to mow it.
I do. I mowed it yesterday. It was rainy on Saturday evening into Sunday morning, but I was still able to mow Sunday late.
We mowed ours yesterday too. But ours is mowed, we live on 7.5 acres. So ours is mowed with a riding lawnmower. And Bill actually mowed it while I planted even more plants. I'm really out of room. And I still have plants. It's that time of year where I got to get everything out of the greenhouse because it's starting to get hot.
Yes. And so I would say that we're both pretty low stress in the garden.
Pretty low stress, yeah.
Pretty low stress.
So we want to encourage other people to be the same, right?
Right. If the garden is stressing you out, you're doing it wrong.
Okay, well, I don't know if that's fair, because some people are A-type personalities and they just stress about everything. But my thing would be, don't be competitive with other people about your garden. Share with each other, be good to each other, and embrace failure. Because if you're a new gardener, you're going to have a lot of failure. If you're an old gardener, you're still going to have some failure. I have failure all the time.
Oh, yeah. And so this is kind of funny, but maybe not funny. So I had this huge basket filled with old plant labels and old seeds, and I've been sorting through it. And I've been putting them out as little 10-minute YouTube videos.
Yes, I saw them.
You can watch me sort my labels. And I swear, I'm just pulling up labels to say, I don't have that anymore. I don't have that anymore. I don't have that anymore. And people must think that I bring plants here to die. I don't have that anymore. I cut that out. I got rid of that. Don't have that. Don't have. And I was like, I better have some of these. I do have a lot, but it's amazing because some of these labels go back 20 years. It's amazing the stuff you bought and then it just sort of disappears.
Yeah.
Not there anymore.
I think when you first, although you didn't just start 20 years ago, but I think there's this time period over a gardener's life where you go through this stage and you're pretty good at it and you think, I'm going to expand and I'm going to test those hardiness zones and different things. And then you kind of learn, you know what, certain plants don't want to live here and I don't make them anymore.
Right. Right. I found many plants that didn't want to live here. And then some of them, I put them in a poor spot and they got swallowed up. And some of them, it's like, I just decided I didn't like that bed. So I cleared out a bunch of things and they went bye-bye anyway.
There was a big discussion on Oklahoma City area gardeners the other day. And the big discussion was about gaillardia, which is blanket flower, Indian blanket. It's our native wildflower in the state of Oklahoma. So a lot of people want to grow it, right? And there were several people on the group. One person in particular, she was stressing about it because she said it often doesn't come back. And so I wrote in and I said, that is a short-lived perennial. So in other words, sometimes it blooms itself to death because it's just so happy that it just blooms and blooms and blooms. Other times it just doesn't make it. And that's okay because it's just a wildflower. Even the varieties of it, like Arizona red shades, punch bowl, those are beautiful. Just grow them and enjoy them. Don't stress over them and let them go when they go.
Right. And I've tried to grow lupines and they just don't like it here.
It's not acidic enough here for them.
No, they don't like it here. And then delphiniums are a big bust for me. So, but it is what it is. And I also found, even though, you bought more plants, Carol, I'm trying to simplify the palette a little bit.
Me too. Me too. Yeah.
So if I have something, I want to have like a big bunch of it and have a simpler palette rather than have what I read in this one book. They called it dottiness, where you have this little flower and that little flower and that little flower. Mm-hmm. I'd rather have more of a simpler palette, which you look out in my garden like, that's not a simple palette.
You watched that Pete Udolph movie, didn't you? That's what did it to you.
I did watch that movie. I didn't think about that. That's kind of what he does. You simplify the palette.
You simplify the palette, although he has a ton of plants. He likes large sweeping vistas of various plants. He calls it like what nature would do, but if we dreamed of it. And he said, like what you wish nature looked like, but you're really planning it. And I think that's true. When I did my newest bed, which runs along the wall, my newest border along the back, I guess the back side of my house, I put in a lot more shrubs and I put in a lot more like simple flowers that are going to stay there a long time. And I simplified that. And you know what? That's the easiest part of my garden to maintain.
Yeah, it is. When you simplify things, it is easier to maintain. Now Pete Udolph, we should say, his sweeping vistas is because he's planning out very, very large gardens.
Large spaces, yeah.
Very large. Like the Lurie Garden up in Chicago, which we both saw that in the spring probably 10 years ago or 11 years ago.
And then we saw it again in the fall.
Yeah, we saw
summer.
In the late summer. But that spring, they had all those purple salvias, and then it was dotted with the yellow baptisia.
Oh, baptisias. And he also had geums. Remember, he had prairie smoke, too. And, oh, my gosh, I came home and I thought, he calls it a salvia river, which you can't tell it's a river until you have a drone. But in that movie, if it's still on, it was supposed to be only on this weekend, you can really see the river because they went up with a drone. So then we saw it. So we saw it in the spring. I came home and immediately ordered prairie smoke because I thought prairie smoke should grow here. Well, it did not like my garden. And I think it's because my garden is too moist for it. It has to grow in a place that's more wildflowerish. Maybe the upper pasture someday. So that was a failure, and that's okay. And now
it is okay.
I know what works in my garden. And some plants I'm willing to grow again and again, even though they don't last very long, like gaillardia, for example.
Right.
And
right. Let me think what I have that I plant again and again. Nothing comes to mind.
I bet you there's something that you really love that you plant over and over again.
Yeah, my annuals.
There you go. Annuals are great. They're the little black dress of the garden, in my opinion.
Yeah, there you go. So anyway, we encourage people not to stress over the garden and to embrace failure. It's just all part of the process. Be in it for the long haul, more than one season.
Yep.
So anyway, that's pretty much our episode this week, Dee. We want to thank everyone for listening to the Garden Angelos. If you like our podcast, please tell your friends about us.
And if you listen on Apple Podcasts, we'd love a 5-star review. That helps us get noticed by others and makes the algorithm know who we are.
Right. And be sure and check out our show notes for links for more information about today's topics, plus links to our own websites.
It was lovely to chat with you over the garden gate today. Bye until next week.
Bye.